Hello, hello. Hello. Hi, Loralee. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Doing well. Thanks for joining.
I apologize in advance if my dogs cry or bark.
It's okay.
One's
Do
already crying.
you want to introduce your dogs to us? They're very important. They're a very important part of this show today, for sure.
Teddy,
Hello.
he's the crying one. There's
And this
Heidi.
Teddy is one of them, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. You
I
might
remember.
remember Teddy from the Tennessee days.
Yes, yes. Well, how is it going? This is Dr. Loralee Songer, everyone that's joining us. So I see some people joining us here. Yay, yay, we got this going. I'm still very impressed with myself every single time I do this
You,
correct.
it's really amazing that you're
Yeah. So Dr. Loralee Songer, she's a mezzo-soprano. We met in Tennessee back in the day. I did my undergraduate degree at Lee University, and she was there the last few years. I was there finishing that up, teaching there.
yes.
And yeah, and I'll just kind of let you introduce yourself as far as the rest of your story, how you discovered teaching. But first, I wanted to ask you an icebreaker question. I like to take questions from people beforehand, and I always get really interesting ones. And I have one that I'm really excited about asking you today. So this is kind of our open question for you, and then we'll go into who you are and your story and how you discovered singing, all that stuff. So here's my question. This is from Carissa. If a song played every time you walked into a room, what would your theme song be?
Oh my gosh. That's such a good question. Like a hype song.
I
What,
know. Yeah, great.
what would my hype song be? I, I love rap music.
That's amazing.
So I feel like it would have to be something in that genre, but then that doesn't narrow it down because I
Yeah,
don't
that needs a lot of
listen
options.
to what I love. So, who, hmm, something Jay Z. I don't know yet. Maybe by the end I'll have thought
Okay,
of something more specific. But
all right. Put it away in your
yeah,
mind and think
I
back.
don't know how people would feel if that happened every time I walked in a room. It'd have to be the clean version, I guess.
It would
But
definitely say people, well,
surprise people.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which is
Love that.
good. I'm always up for the surprise factor.
Well, because don't you teach, do you still, I know that at one time you were teaching like a contemporary music class. By the way, is my connection okay? It was kind of, am I cutting in and out or am I good today?
You're good.
Excellent.
Hopefully my
Okay. Yeah, we're good. Um, yeah, so yeah, I remembered you saying that you taught a contemporary music class. Is that right?
So when I was teaching in Iowa, I
Uh-huh.
taught a class. They do like a first year seminar that all freshmen or first year students have to take. And I taught a class called From Bach to Beyonce.
I
And
love
so we started with Bach and then we went through, all of classical music, but then we did country music, pop music, and then we always ended with hip hop. But I teach a general music class now called Art as Experience at my new job. And basically music for non-majors. They have to take 7 weeks of art and then 7 weeks of music. And we do all classical music. And then I make sure to save the last like week or so for hip hop. I just have to get it in somehow.
and I'm sure they love that. Like I
Most,
would have loved that
yeah,
class as
most people do. And I'm careful about what I play. And I mean, there's so much not great music out there, not great even in the genre of hip hop. So I'm really careful about what I play and what I really consider to be art.
yeah.
I yeah, it's interesting. I never want to assume that people listen to that because a lot of them don't,
Hmm.
and they have to take a test, a listening exam on some of these, and I'm usually surprised at how often people are not familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. That
I don't
brings up
they
another,
expect to learn in a
yeah,
music, but that's what happens when I teach it. So
yeah, I love that. And that brings up a whole nother issue, which we could spend a whole interview talking about, but diversity and how, traditionally in music schools and conservatories here in the US and around the world, Western classical music has been favored, and
right,
there's other there's tons of other genres out there that are not regarded as highly, which is just ridiculous.
right.
Ridiculous. So
I think sometimes people don't know and I could go on and on about this, but
yeah.
that's not what it's for. But somebody like Kendrick Lamar, who
Mm-hmm.
won a Pulitzer Prize,
Right, exactly.
this is really unbelievable if you break it down and really listen to it's genius.
Yeah,
It's absolute genius, but so many people are turned off by it because of the language, but I don't think that they really take into consideration why they're even using that language.
yeah, yeah.
I'm from a small town in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
What would I know about growing up in Compton? I don't know anything
Right,
about it. So
right.
yeah, it's tricky. And I teach at a Christian school, and I try to be really sensitive about what I'm playing and what I'm introducing to students, but I'm I'm always happy if people are just exposed to something that they wouldn't be otherwise, and they can just appreciate. I use that word constantly.
Totally.
You don't have to love Mozart,
Yeah,
but we're going to listen and we're going to appreciate it. You don't have to love Eminem, but we're going to listen and we're going to appreciate.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that would be really interesting. I might store that away and maybe talk to you later about talking to you more about that in another interview or something with
Sure.
talking about contemporary music and how to teach that. I think that's, yeah, I think that's very relevant in today's world. So that's great. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about teaching mezzo-sopranos. So as I said, those of you that are joining, Dr. Loralee Songer is a mezzo-soprano. She is an educator. She's a recitalist. She is an author. She's a conductor, all things to all people. She's a true Renaissance woman. So, and she's into hip hop, but we're not here to talk about that really today. So let's talk about her story, how she came to discover singing and teaching. So if you could just give us a bit of background on yourself.
Sure. So as I mentioned just briefly a minute ago, I'm from a very small town in Indiana, a couple thousand people, but it's a college town,
Uh-huh.
oddly enough. And so I sang when I was young, but I was very shy, like painfully shy. And I hope we talk about personality types. I watched your
Yeah,
interview with Amy, and it was so interesting. I was saying things out loud that I was hoping that we could talk about, because it's an important part of my story.
yeah, sure.
Because I do not find what I do to come naturally to my personality, which actually is a testament of how much I love singing.
Amen.
Because I mean, I've
yeah.
sung for, professionally for like 20 years. And most of the time I leave the stage and I think, I can't believe I did that. I
Wow.
can't, I stood up in front of people.
Wow.
It's like mind blowing to me. So very, very shy
Yeah.
as a child. And in my family, we had to do something musical. And my mom really was pulling for band for as long as possible, until I tried to get out of band by saying I could join the choir.
Uh-huh.
And I did. And I had some teachers in elementary school, middle school, high school who really said, you're quite good at this, even though I was very shy. And so that was sort of the tricky part. But then I gained some confidence and some experience. And then I thought, hey, I think I am okay at this. So I felt okay enough to go to college. So yeah, so then I went to Taylor University, which is actually where I teach now. I ended up back at my alma mater and studied vocal performance there, and then had the sort of big life question that happens in between undergrad and question mark. So it was, I had friends who were moving to New York and moving to Chicago. I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing for me. And so I really didn't even think I was capable of getting a master's degree. School has always been hard for me. And I thought, well, what else am I going to do? That's a terrible reason to get to get a degree. But really, I mean, honestly, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. So did my master's at Ball State University in the town where I live now, Muncie, Indiana. And I had a really, really wonderful teacher there, Dr. Mezzos, and she basically said, you just need to stay. You need to stay and do the doctorate. And you know all about that.
Mhm.
Now we could have a whole conversation about that. But part of, and I think this is sort of the age old story, because Amy talked about this too, is that I hadn't really taught, but then I went to graduate school and my assistantship was to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So I was teaching non-majors and also a couple minors. My piano skills were not great back then. I didn't have an accompanist. I had to play for my own lessons. I had a minimal library. This is before a lot of things are electronic. And that was my first exposure to teaching. And because I had to pay for school. And so then I stayed and did the doctorate, and then again, to not think that I was capable of doing a master's, and then went and did a doctorate but grad school was easier for me. Grad school is so much easier for me than undergrad. I went to liberal arts school, and so sociology, just not really.
Right. It makes it when you're interested in every class that you're taking, for sure. Yeah.
Right. Right. So graduate school is so much easier, so much easier. And then I was 26 when I was ABD. So I started looking for jobs, and I had great mentors and people who just said, you just have to try. Send out as many applications. If nothing happens, you'll stay in town and write your dissertation. Just apply. So I applied for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And ended up getting the job at Lee.
Right.
And a really great first job. And what I learned specifically, a lot of things about that job, but it was a voice and choir job.
Right.
And I had experience in both. My secondary was in conducting, but it was at that job that I realized from here on out, I have to be singing and I have to be conducting.
Wow.
So the next job after that was a choir job, voice job. And then this new job, I don't have any ensembles, but when I interviewed, I said, I really am not going to be professionally fulfilled if I'm not conducting in some capacity. So that could be teaching, conducting. I need that. And they heard me, and they gave me conducting 1, which is my favorite class to teach. And I just know that about myself now, that I'd be fine teaching voice and vocal pedagogy and diction and all those things, but I love conducting.
Yeah.
A really important skill for musicians to have, because it's made me more marketable. It really has in the job search. You could do a secondary in music ed or music history. That's great. But the conducting really has it's gotten me every one of my jobs.
Yep. I remember you saying that, because I called Loralee when I was thinking about going back to my doctorate, and she was someone that I reached out to just to get some advice and to get some direction. And I remember you telling that to me. I like conducting. I didn't take your advice.
No, and you have to love it.
It's not my.
And I just happened to love it, and it was something I took to really naturally. And we all have different things that we like. So I started teaching. I was quite young and moved away from home for the first time in my life, from the Midwest to the South, which is a big cultural shock. Yeah. Shock for me. But I survived. And and then I've been teaching college ever since. I mean, I'm in my 12th year of teaching. That's great. At level, which is, I'm really grateful that I've been employed this whole time. Yes. In something that I trained for, and in something that I really enjoy. That alone I'm so grateful for that, especially now. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And the job market is a little difficult right now because of current events. Um, Great. So let me go to one other icebreaker question before we talk about these other questions. So Stephanie asks, what's your favorite moment from the holidays?
Oh, okay. I'm going to try to make this short,
Okay.
but my mother's cat, several weeks ago, my mother's cat ran away,
Oh.
and she was gone for a very long, stressful 5 days, but then she
Hmm.
came back, and it was like the 2020 miracle that she came back. So
Yay.
in the background, you see these portraits of my
Yes,
dogs.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
a little crazy. I got one for my mom of her cat, and her opening that up and seeing the portrait of her cat, there was a lot of squealing and exclaiming, and it was really, really sweet. So I'm fortunate that my sister lives, I could walk to my sister's house. My
Uh-huh.
mom 30 minutes away. We spend a lot of time together, which makes up for the 10 years that I didn't live
Right, right,
here.
right. Yeah,
It's a lot of, I feel really spoiled that I get to see my family all the time, but that was a really great moment.
love that.
Yeah.
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 Oh, that's a great present. I love those portraits. It's amazing.
They're really realistic.
They're
They were,
really cute. All right. So let's move on to teaching. So this is a little unique from the other interviews I've had because I am a mezzo-soprano. I wasn't always a mezzo-soprano. I was a soprano and then I switched Fox about 2 years ago now, maybe like a year and a half ago. So I'm still kind of fresh. But so I kind of have this perspective. I'm a soprano that's taught other sopranos, and now I'm a mezzo-soprano that's teaching other mezzo-sopranos as well. But I wanted to get another mezzo-soprano on here to talk about teaching mezzos specifically. I'm still learning, of course, and about this voice type in more depth since I'm singing this repertoire more. But let's talk a little bit about what you think is the same about teaching mezzo-sopranos as all other voice types. So this is just more generally about how you approach teaching all voice types.
yeah, before I go into it, I don't know if we've ever talked about how I used to be a soprano.
I don't know if we've talked about that either.
So I was up until I went to get my master's.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you had a late switch
So
as
I
well.
had yeah, I was
Mm-hmm.
20, would have been 21 or 22. And
Mm-hmm.
it was complicated.
Yeah,
I
totally.
remember my senior year in college, my teacher said, okay, we're really at a crossroads here. Do you want to learn all new rep for your senior recital? Or do you want to just stick it out? And it could be a little bit of a struggle, but just stay in the soprano rep and do it. And then when you get to graduate school, you'll probably switch. And that's what I did. The
Wow.
I just it was too overwhelming
Yeah.
at that time to just switch gears completely. So I stayed. And then as soon as I went to grad, I had like a preview lesson with my teacher, and she said, "Oh no, 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 yeah, we're we're gonna switch."
Yeah.
So I
Mm-hmm.
understand that, and just mentally, it really does a number on
Even if
you.
you don't think it's going to, I've always been pretty secure with who I am, but it was an identity crisis that I was not
True.
expecting.
Yeah. So I'm very empathetic when I have students who are sort of their voices are changing and they're sort of panicking. It's like, no, we don't need
Hmm.
to panic. We just embrace what it is right now, and
Exactly.
we'll see how it works out. Um, okay, wait, I already forgot the question.
So what's the same about teaching all voice types, basically?
I come from authenticity is very important to me. I know we don't know each other like really super well, and I don't know how much you even remember me from my Lee days, but I've always been very, very authentic, very straightforward.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, no, I definitely remember that about you. I think that's
better or worse. Some people, it,
bad. I remember
that's okay. It's fine. I still sleep at night, whether or not
that.
people think I mean, because I'm not, but it's just who I am. So that authenticity is important in every area of my life. And I try to bring that to my voice teaching. And I think that there are just so many, talk about an identity crisis, there's so many stigmas around each voice type. And it's easy to sort of get sucked in to what a soprano is supposed to be.
Yep.
What a mezzo is supposed to sound like. What a countertenor is supposed to, look like, whatever. I'm always just trying to find everyone's optimum authentic voice, really? Wherever they are. Yeah. I just want people to sing healthily, with authenticity. I'm not trying to make people sound like me. There's only one of me. I'm enough. Just because I think some teachers do that. Some teachers want their students to sound like them, and they teach them all the same. Okay, the concepts for me are the same. Support, talking about space, and all the singer terms that we know and love. The concepts are the same. Right. But every time a person comes in to the studio, they have a completely different personality, different body, and a different, it's different. And I would like to think that this is not anything groundbreaking, because I hope that a lot of people are doing this. But I think just because my personality, that it tends to be more obvious with me, because I try to be extremely clear about my expectations and how I just want people to be themselves. I don't like to classify young singers. I mean, you have to. Right. A lot of times you have to. But I don't talk about it a lot. I just want people to sing what they want to sing. Like what are they going to do well? I don't care what key it's in. I don't care if it's, normally a such and such sings this. I don't care. If you sing it well, then that's great. I just want people to sing well, to sing healthfully, and really to come into their own. Because there are so many cookie cutter sopranos. So many, not just sopranos, but we know the type.
Right.
And that's not going to read well if you're just the same. But if you know your instrument and you know what you bring to the table, I think that's really important. Yeah. Because confident, people can see it. If it's real. If it's false confidence, most people can also see that.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to build people up to be as healthy as possible, but to learn how to be secure in the sounds that they're making. And I encourage people freak out if they make bad sounds. And I don't know how many times a day I say, you think I haven't made that?
Exactly.
Sound? I've made worse. Probably just today I've made a worse sound than that. And I know that you and Amy talked quite a bit about perfectionism and all of that. That plus, I mean, we just live in this world where we're not supposed to make mistakes.
Exactly.
But my word, the process of singing is so complicated,
right? Yeah.
How will you know how to even certain sound if you don't get through all the other stuff?
Exactly.
Somebody's voice cracks and then it's like the end of the world. And I always say, if that's the worst thing that happens in your day today, then you've had a really good day.
Exactly. This is such a good perspective.
It doesn't hurt my feelings that your voice cracked. And it shouldn't hurt your feelings either.
Yeah.
Because it's part of the process. We beat ourselves up constantly. And so that's just general. I just try to join people where they are in their journey. And I teach quite a few musical theater students because we have a BFA where and that's a different thing.
Absolutely.
Every way it's a different thing, because I'm not a belter, but I've done classes and I sing musical theater, but it's all like crossover. Right. Classical.
Yeah.
But there's just a different expectation with musical theater students. They're in different classes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I just want people to be themselves. Like life, it seems so cheesy, but life is too short to try to be like somebody else.
Yeah.
We're taught that we need to look a certain way and sound a certain way. And it's like, why waste your life trying to do that when if you're singing healthily with great intention and with authentic feelings, then that's the best that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And people can, I say this a lot for students, audiences, we do not give them enough credit.
Mm-hmm.
They usually can tell
Mm-hmm.
if someone is authentic or not.
Mm-hmm.
You can stand up there and sing all the right words and all the right notes and be so proud of yourself, but that's it. You think that you can fool somebody. Maybe you can. If you're singing in German and you mess up, you can probably fool somebody, but no, it just has to be in the moment and to be themselves and to not apologize for it. I'm a huge my poor students, I have a sorry jar in my office, and if people apologize, then they have to pay me.
I love that. I love that.
Because again, not going to hurt my feelings if you sing a wrong note. If
Mm-hmm.
you say a wrong word, don't apologize for it. It didn't hurt my feelings. If you do hurt my feelings, I will tell you that, and then I would accept a real apology. But
Yeah.
as women we're just ingrained. It's ingrained in us to say we're sorry. And I won't do it unless I
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah. I feel like I resonate so much with what you're saying right now, because a lot of the new students I get, it will be the first few months are just a process of getting them to make ugly sounds.
right.
Words, good or bad, in my studio.
Yeah.
And because I'm not trying to make them make a right sound. I don't think there's a wrong and a right sound. I think it's all a color spectrum, and that's kind of how and as
Which
you
is so freeing.
exactly.
Freeing to know that there's no judgment, that you're just trying to figure it out.
Right.
So complicated, and so much of it is happening inside that we don't like, how we can't see it. So we're trying to work through how our bodies even work. And
Yeah.
if you're worried and there's so much tension and stress involved with making a certain sound that you think is right, if we free our students up from that and say, just do it,
Yes.
just sing, whatever happens will happen. There's no judgment. We have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to be without some unpleasant feelings.
Exactly. And it's so hard to do that in front of someone if you're not okay doing that with yourself.
Ooh.
Right. And I think I have to spend so much time with and I mean, I'm saying this and I have to watch this in myself all the time. It's so,
right.
It's
Right.
so hard to stay in this mindset versus trying to get everything right, trying to present yourself as in a certain way all the time. And when something goes wrong, not to think it's the end of the world. I mean, I fall into that all the time. It's
Yeah.
so hard to remember. I have someone asking if Stephanie is asking, are you into the Enneagram? So what do you know your Enneagram number, right? I think I talked.
Yeah, I do. And it's interesting. I'm not like full blown into it. And the number that I resonate with, because they're wings and all that, I don't really any of that. But the one that I resonate with the absolute most is an 8. And that can be complicated.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because my intention is never to make someone feel uncomfortable or to.
And by the way, everyone, that's an Enneagram is a personality test for those of you that don't know, and an 8 I think is the nickname is like the powerful person or something like that.
Challenger.
The challenger. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Challenger. So some characteristics of an 8 would be outspoken, very blunt, and we could talk a lot about what it's like to be a female in academia. I could write a book about it. Hasn't been the best experience of my life, but I'm working through. But to be an 8, there are not a lot of female 8s,
right?
And so I find that I mean, again, this is just a society thing, that there's an expectation,
yes,
of what a woman
Mm-hmm.
be and
Mm-hmm.
how they sound and how they talk and how they approach things. And I'm not necessarily that.
Right.
So I but I think some of the reason why people who are really into it say, well, yeah, that'll make sense, but I'm also very quiet. I'm extremely introverted and very quiet.
That surprises me about you.
One-on-one, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
But like meetings, I don't say very much. But then when I do say something, it's going to be very concise and probably very opinionated. And
Mm-hmm.
then I go back to listening.
Right.
I talk just to talk. I don't like to hear myself talk. I just like to listen and observe.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll usually have something very strong to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's tricky because I'm not necessarily, people would not describe me as overly sensitive or warm or any of these things, mothering, whatever that even means, maternal. That's not my job.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm not your mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my job. My job is to try to help you move forward.
Right.
And I say this in my conducting class. I always have to give a disclaimer and say, I'm going to say things to you. My intention is not to hurt your feelings. But if your hand looks like a dead fish, I'm going to tell you that your hand looks like a dead fish. That doesn't mean you are a dead fish. I'm not saying anything about you personally.
Mm-hmm.
And if I did, I will apologize if I hurt your feelings.
Right.
But me just going around and saying, oh, great, that looks great. Everything's great. Right. No.
Right. Right.
Not great.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something too that will work to benefit your students, because if you're in the music world, as we all know, you're going to get feedback. You're going to get people that do say things they can say it in a way that makes it feel like it's a personal attack, right?
Right.
You have to be good at kind of weeding through that, and even if someone does say something that's personal, taking that and again, knowing who you are. And I think that this kind of goes back to what you were saying about authenticity, knowing where your worth comes from, knowing that you're someone outside of your singing, and
right.
and being able to take that and move forward, which again, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not. It's hard for anybody.
Oh, I mean, I've gotten course evaluations. People have had personal attacks on me and said, that I'm mean and mean spirited and I'm unapproachable, and it's hurtful.
Yeah, right.
It's really, really hurtful, because I care about what I do and I do care deeply about students. I just am always going to tell them what I think will help them move forward. And again, not to get too much into playing the woman card, but I guarantee that if I were not a woman, that people would write on my evaluations how assertive I am. I was straightforward and assertive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am those things.
Very true.
So why do you have to say that I'm mean?
Yep.
And abrasive. Oh, I get that one a lot. Abrasive.
Yeah.
Yeah, very abrasive.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see how you might take it that way, but you're expecting me to be something else.
Right.
And I'm not anybody else.
Right. Right.
You don't like to be told the truth, and you want me to give you 4 extensions because it's the nice thing to do. Go to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It is complicated. But I love that you're talking about the
pleaser. I'm not a peacemaker. I'm very serious about what I do, and I'm constantly thinking about what is the most efficient way to get there. And usually it's not sitting around and talking about our feelings.
Right. Well, and I think your career and your life shows that. I mean, you are a go-getter, and you've sung at Carnegie Hall. You've had, a very successful, in my opinion, voice career, and that's not an easy thing to do, teaching and singing. So I mean, I think that's a testament to how you're handling these situations and how you are being assertive. And I totally hear that with females in academia. I mean, that is something that I noticed too. And I think, again, that's opening a whole nother can of worms that I
Right.
love to talk to you about in more depth, because it's
Yes.
a whole lot there. But I love that perspective of being truthful and honest with your students. I think that's our job as teachers, and
Never. And I'm again, because I am very careful about the
Mhm.
words that I use.
Mhm.
Like in conducting, if we're practicing rehearsing, if they say, "Oh, okay, good," then I stop them and say, "Was it good?
Mhm.
Was it? If it was, more great. But
Mhm.
did you really think it was good? Did you think it was great, or is that just your go-to filler?"
Right.
Words matter. So just like words matter for me to be very straightforward and honest,
Mhm.
intention would never be to hurt somebody's feelings. So it usually, with new students, it usually takes a couple of lessons to
Right.
sort of get used to each other.
Right.
I had a student in Iowa, and she cried almost every lesson. And I mean, I don't think I was being mean. And so I just finally, I said, okay, I just need to know, do you want me to keep pushing you, or do you want me to back off?
Mm.
Because I think we need to have this conversation. Because
Mm.
if you want me to back off, I will do that. And I'm so glad I had that conversation, because she said, "Oh no, no, I want you to keep pushing me. This is just sometimes how I respond, because I'm mad at myself.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
with myself, and so this is how I process it. And I never apologize for being emotional. That's a whole other thing. What,
Absolutely.
what I always say is, I do not apologize for being emotional. I do apologize if this makes you feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm emotional because I care. That's a response. I'm disappointed in something, or I'm, that's just a normal response.
Mhm.
But I read her emotional response as I was doing something that was causing this. But by having that conversation and not being afraid, then that was a real turning point for us, because then I could push her, and sometimes she just had to work it out emotionally and then recover, and then we kept going, and we kept pushing.
Mm.
But if I
I,
wouldn't have had that conversation with her, I think my instinct would have been, I got to back off. I
exactly.
can't just keep crying. Like I've got to just have a different approach and make things easier. But I've always I've always remembered her. I try to remember all my students, but that was really impactful for me, because the one-on-one, the teaching one-on-one, oh, it's so vulnerable.
Absolutely.
It's so vulnerable. And as a teacher, it's vulnerable, because you're trying to do the best you can, and you sometimes don't know them all that well, and you're trying to get used to not just their voice, but where they are in any given day,
Mm-hmm.
day that they've had. And this whole come as you are approach, that's my whole thing, is that I want people to be authentic. They could be authentically terrible on that day.
Yeah.
We have to work through that, and that's part of being a musician,
Mm-hmm.
being able to work through whatever we were given on any given day. I mean, everybody has to deal with that, but not everybody is getting up then and singing in front of
Right.
people after had a
Right.
horrible experience.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, most people can like cry at their desk and
Right. Right.
fine. We can't really do that, so it's complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated. All right, let's move on to the next question. I have so many things I want to talk to you about, but I'm going to try to stay on track a little bit here. Okay, so what is the same about teaching students? Oh, so no, sorry. What is different? We already asked the same. What is different about teaching mezzo-sopranos versus teaching all other voice types?
Yeah, good question. I think what's different is that I have the most experience,
Mm-hmm.
what it feels like.
Sure.
So I say a lot to my male students, I don't know what that feels like. I think it's important for them to know that I may know what to do on paper, and I may be able to give suggestions based on what I know about anatomy and, you know, whatever, but I don't know what it feels like.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, that they need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
But with mezzos, I find, of course, there's a comfort level because you do know what it feels like, and you do know how to maneuver.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think the background in soprano has also helped me a lot, because while it's been a while, I do remember what it feels like, and I do remember how to maneuver my way through
Mm-hmm.
that. So that has helped a lot. While it was, you know, wildly crazy at the time, and you have
Right.
just recently, so you're probably, you know, of course, you're getting used to it. But yeah, there's just a comfort level there, and I feel more empathetic about the challenges that they're having because I'm probably having them myself.
Sure.
On a different level. I'm probably having, I mean, of course, we have the same problems,
Right.
just come up at different times. So
right.
yeah, I just feel the most comfortable, which I think most people would say.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if a counter teacher's teaching a countertenor, it's like, okay, you
Yeah.
can dig into what the challenges are.
Right. Let me ask you this question because again, for those of you joining us, both Loralee and I both were sopranos at one point, and then are now mezzos. I switched later than she did, but we both switched later. I would say later in our lives. So tell me what was something that when you made that transition, and this will kind of hit on the same question. What was different about the way that you were using your voice then? What were some new things that you had to consider when you started singing mezzo-soprano repertoire?
My teacher in graduate school, and I feel like my teacher in undergrad started to introduce this during the change, but it was so late in my undergrad years that I think she just wanted me to finish.
Yeah.
And knowing full well. And so my teacher in graduate school said, okay, we're going to strengthen the low and middle. But as a result, I believe that this top that you used to have, it's not going to be our main thing right now because we're strengthening low and middle. Then it will be better. The top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I am a high mezzo. I mean, there's no question about that. That it depends on the work, but I mean, like Messiah, I could never do soprano again. But there are plenty of other works that if I looked at the score, I could probably do soprano. So that has its benefits. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it has its challenges because again, if somebody has the expectation of what a mezzo sounds like, I'm not going to fit it.
Right.
Because if you want this really, really heavy kind of sound, you're not going to get it.
Right.
You'll get high notes. You'll get higher notes than you might from somebody else. But again, that's sort of figuring out what you bring to the table, what you have to offer, what colors you have to offer, and it might not be what somebody wants.
Right.
That's okay. They'll find somebody else.
Right.
But you have to figure out what your strengths are. So she was right, of course,
Mm-hmm.
that we really focused low and middle, which as a soprano, I think sometimes we're scared.
Yeah.
We're scared because we don't know what to do because we're usually not there.
Or we take it for granted. I felt like maybe that was my sign that I was really a mezzo all my life, but I was like, this middle step, I love it. It's so easy. Like,
right.
and
And other sopranos are like, what? I can't. I don't want to do that. I just want to stay up in my way stratosphere. And that's fine. But it was sort of introducing, getting comfortable, more low and middle. And
mm-hmm.
then she was right that as a result, once that felt more stable, then the high, it just became easier. I'll never have the high notes that I used to. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. I had to work through that emotionally, psychologically, do that.
Okay.
It was really important for me to know. If she only would have said, we're just going to strengthen low and middle,
mm-hmm.
I think I would have been mourning the top, and it would have been unnecessary
mm-hmm.
because the top came back.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, but she told me straight out, this is why we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And as a result, this is what I believe will happen. And so I felt like I had things to look forward to. It was motivational for me that, not that it's all about high notes, but I think coming off of being a soprano, to lose that is tricky.
Yeah.
So if I knew why I was doing it, okay, great. I'm going to strengthen low middle. That makes sense for a mezzo. But if a perk is going to be that I still get to go up there a little bit, where I used to, just a different kind of sound, then that was important for me, an important part of the journe. But
right, because I don't remember who said this, but mezzo-soprano is still soprano, right? Like you still, you still have to sing though. It's a type of soprano. Right. You have to sing those high notes every now and then.
Yeah, that's great. It's its name. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on. So what and again, you're kind of hitting on this already. What kind of vocal challenges do you see most often in students of your own voice type? So in mezzo-sopranos, what kind of voice challenges do you often see?
Yeah, I did touch on that a little bit, but I think because we get caught up in what we think we're supposed to sound like, then whether we mean to or not, we start manufacturing a sound that we think we should have.
Yeah, true.
Because I have a student right now, and he's so promising. He's a really, really great tenor, very promising. But I have had to say to him multiple times, you're trying to sound like somebody you've listened to, I can tell. And whoever you're listening to is great. It's just not you. So I'm trying to strip that all away and get to the core of what his voice is. And it is hard because he's fighting me on it, but it's not intentionally. Like he's not listening to me. He's just trying to get out of that habit. And by getting that habit, you have to introduce being vulnerable.
Right.
And being okay with trying to find your own voice and what that means. Because we can mimic. We're pretty good at that. And so if we think, oh, well, if I try to sound like Renee Fleming, then maybe that will be great for me. People tell me I look like Renee Fleming, so maybe that's enough. I certainly sound like her. Sometimes I do. But yeah, so I think that when we're classifying and we're saying I'm this, then we think, okay, well then I have to have this quality of sound. I try to get out of that. I try to get away from that. Sing in whatever key makes you feel comfortable. I sing things in high keys all the time because that's what feels comfortable for me.
And I think that's thankfully, I think that's changing. People are becoming more and more okay with that. And also like the perspective thing, like singing a song that's traditionally sung by a male or a female.
Right.
That's changing, which is, and I think totally appropriate for where we are in
I agree.
Yeah.
So with mezzos, there is that sort of, I have to have this, like over darkened sound. And as a result, then sometimes they think, well, I don't have to have the top. I don't need to have the top. I'm not going to sing above F, whatever, E. Oh, I don't need to do that because I'm not a soprano. Yeah, you do. Because composers don't just write in your little one octave range.
Right.
You have to have it. But I think that like sopranos might say, oh, well, I don't need to sing below middle C. I'm not ever gonna do that. So you put limits on yourself.
Right.
We label, and we have to label.
Right.
But I didn't really feel like I came into my own and knew my voice and it felt solid until I was like 30. 30, 31, 32. And luckily, I just don't buy into a lot of like, I don't think those things. I don't think that I have to have a certain sound, and I don't think that I don't have to have top notes, but I can see why people do think that.
Right.
But a 24-year-old should not be thinking that.
Right.
They should just be figuring out how their own instrument works.
Right.
And then it starts to settle in.
Right.
And that's the exciting part. But it takes a long time to get there.
Right.
A long time to get there.
So I have a question about something that you said earlier, the mimicry thing. I think this is an interesting thing to talk about and think about. Sometimes I find that some students just don't know what their voices are capable of. They don't know that they can make a big sound. They don't know that they can make an opera singer sound. And sometimes I do have them go listen, and I'm like, just try to sound like someone. See what happens if you go and you listen to this person and you just try to experiment and make your voice sound like this. And of course, I'm not trying to make them sound like that person forever, but I find that sometimes that's a good place to start in the discovery process of finding the different colors of someone's voice. So I just wonder what your take on, you know, maybe there's a better word, but mimicry, and then also your take on how you go about finding someone's authentic voice. How do you go about, you know, stripping those kind of things away if someone comes to you and wants to sound like someone and you want them to sound like themselves?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think that what you just described is a great thing, because we have to be so vulnerable when we sing. I find that people either don't know that they're capable, or they're too afraid to really go there.
Right.
To make those kind of sounds. It's very scary. But by listening and in the comfort of their own space, where it's just them, they can make whatever sounds they want. Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And as long as you keep an eye on it, like if they now are obsessed with this one person and you start to hear things that are not quite what they normally do and it sounds like they're mimicking, then I would just try to get a handle on that. Right. But I absolutely, you know, I know plenty of people who are like that don't ever listen to a recording.
Right.
I wouldn't be a singer if I never listened to a recording.
Right.
Because I would have no inspiration, I would know no repertoire. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They exist for a reason, and we can learn so much from them, as long as you don't get obsessed with sounding like Kathleen Battle. I mean, right. I'm obsessed with sounding like Kathleen Battle, but I'm never going to. So, yeah. And the authentic thing, so much of it is just the language that I try to use. Mm. At the end of my conducting class, at the end of the semester, I always give out permission cards. And this is something my best friend in Iowa, we used to co-teach conducting together. And we used to say that a lot in class, like, I'm giving you permission to just look crazy, like go way outside of your box, give yourself permission to do that. We use that word a lot. So then we thought, well, we've got to turn this into something. So we have these permission cards that we give out at the end that basically say, I'm going to give myself permission to go out into the world and to be myself, and to, you know, it's some eloquent card that she and I wrote. Yeah. But it's using that kind of language. Oh. It's constantly reinforcing, reminding them that whatever sound they're making, it's not wrong. It's not gross. It's part of the process. And it so much of it is psychological. It's just constantly reinforcing and saying, okay, that's totally normal. Totally normal. Because if not, they'll shut down. They'll shut down, and then they'll say, well, okay, I'll just listen to Bryn Terfel, and I just want to sound like Bryn Terfel. Great. Again, who doesn't want to sound like Bryn Terfel? But if you can get to the bottom of it psychologically, then I feel like the authenticity comes out so much more organically, because you're just allowing whatever is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love coming from a language approach, right? More than doing anything about it. just making sure that your studio feels like somewhere people can truly be themselves.
Right. In every way.
Mm-hmm.
Every way. I don't care what somebody's into. I don't care. Like, I care that they're working hard and they're practicing, and, you know, but everybody's different. They should feel comfortable to be in my studio, to be themselves, to make sounds that are not okay, traditionally maybe what we think we're supposed to be making that day. It's just constant reinforcement. And
Mm.
I think there's something about admitting it yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
say a lot, oh, I I crack all the time. Like, it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Or I tell them stories about being in a performance situation and having something go crazy. You know, I
Right.
once
Right.
choked on my own saliva in the middle of
Yes.
a funeral. I was singing at a funeral. There was no place to swallow, and I didn't know what to do. I choked. I literally choked.
Yes. Been there, done that.
For them to know that about me,
Mm,
because
that's
it's
so good.
easy to look at your teacher and think nothing's ever gone wrong. You know, they see
Yeah.
us, hear us, and they think, well, yeah, you didn't know me when I was 19.
Right.
You didn't know me even when I was 30, and and I'm still figuring it out.
Right.
But by being vulnerable yourself as the instructor and saying, oh, been there, that's happened to me. You know, somebody has a memory slip during a jury and it's like the worst possible thing in their life. And it's like, it happens
Right.
to everybody.
Right.
It just happens, and it's okay that it happens. It doesn't have anything to do with who you are as a person. Your
Mm,
worth has nothing to do with whether or not you sang all the right notes or did all the things. It doesn't have anything to do with that.
mm-hmm.
That's easy for me to say as someone who's almost 40 versus saying that to an 18-year-old.
Right.
But I always have sort of felt very comfortable with myself. I've always had, you know, good self-esteem and confidence. And part of that is because I'm so introverted that I prefer to spend time with myself.
Right.
So you kind of have to be okay with yourself
Know
if,
yourself.
if you want to spend time with just yourself. It's, yeah, because a lot of people don't want to do that.
Mm.
They don't want to be alone with
Mm-hmm.
their own thoughts. They want to be with other people. I'm fine with my own thoughts. I'm entertained by my own thoughts. But that makes it difficult then for me to go out into the performing world where there's an expectation of how I'm supposed to act, and I just don't do that.
Yeah.
I
Right.
can't do it. I can't.
Yeah. 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 This is great. I think that voice is so much, and this is something everyone says, I know, but voice is so tricky and it's so exhilarating because your voice is a part of you. It's not an instrument that you can separate from yourself. So all of the things that we've talked about, we're going in way more of a mental direction. And I love this because I think this is where it starts, even before technique. These are the kind of things you have to tackle. And as you said before, I absolutely agree with you that the audience can spot it. I remember one of my friends, Richard Truxell, who was singing in Carmen with me last year, 2 years ago, when we did that, and I was going through my transition from soprano to mezzo-soprano. I was a mess because I was having all these, like I said, identity crisis. I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? I was kind of teetering on the edge, trying to decide. And he said something similar to what you said, where he was like, there are a million singers in the world. And he was talking about Fach, but he was like, you have to pick the repertoire. You have to pick the thing that makes you feel like you, and the thing that makes you present yourself as the most confident version of yourself, because that's what people are going to see, the most real version of yourself, the most authentic version of yourself. So, there's so many discussions to be had about Fach in that, and or genres of music. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's where everything starts, and your relationship with your students, the way that they feel in your studio, that's so important, and it's important.
And and for some people, that might not be what they want,
Right.
what they need. They want a certain kind of sound,
Right.
and they want somebody who's just going to get them there.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. But I teach at a really small school, and community is everything
Mm-hmm.
there. I think that that's very welcome. It's a very welcome thing for people to just talk through. It's, yeah. And it's a lifelong process.
Well, exactly. And I think that that's so, again, that's something that's so attractive to me about studying voice is I do feel like it's not just about studying voice. It's about studying voice, but it's about studying voice, right? It's about so much more. It's about becoming a better human.
Right.
Yeah. So
You learn so much about yourself. The one-on-one, it can be brutal.
mm-hmm.
It can be really brutal because it's just you and you don't have anybody to blame except you.
Right.
Because you did it and it came out of your body. So, but
yeah.
again, when that happens and I can sense that a student is tanking,
mm-hmm.
confidence wise, then I just reinforce and say, no big deal.
Yep.
No big deal. I want you to walk out of the studio. Don't beat yourself up about this. Like, move on today. Take note of what happened and how you're going to adjust that. Just embrace the process.
Mm-hmm.
But I want you worried about this 2 weeks from now, that you had this little thing.
Right.
I want you to walk out of here and know that you as a human being are not less because this happened.
Exactly.
And I think you're exactly right. And I mean, we know that singers are their own special neurotic selves. I mean, I feel like I can say that because I know I am.
Yeah.
That is because we house our instruments, and so we're constantly thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly. How much water did I drink? How much sleep did I get? I've got this terrible like acid reflux thing happening now, and I'm really paranoid. And so I'm like obsessed with every single thing that I'm eating and calling because I need to get scoped. And it's constant.
Mm.
You can't just put it away in a box and put it in a locker.
Right.
You can't do it. And that comes with so many psychological challenges. Yeah. But you can separate. The earlier you can do that in your singing journey, to separate that and know that, like, if I found out that I only had 1 week left of singing, I mean, it would be devastating. But my family doesn't love me because I'm a singer. My friends are hopefully still going to be my friends, even if I can't sing. I have other skills that I could use. I mean, I don't stay up and think about that's horrible. But I think you have to come to terms with that. Like, I've got, I hope, 15 more great singing years. Mm-hmm. But after that, I mean, it's not like it's going to last forever.
Right.
And if your whole identity is tied into the sounds that you make, that's going to be really devastating when the sounds start to change.
Absolutely. That's so true. Yeah. Okay. So I love talking to you. I
love talking to you.
So you can answer as much of this as you want, but I usually ask people, what are your 3 favorite vocal exercises specifically for mezzos, or maybe not, they don't have to be specific exercise, but maybe something that you work on with mezzo-sopranos.
Sure. I was glad that Amy, and this could be a whole other conversation, but she talked quite a bit about speech.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
About that. So an exercise that I would do is to find someone's natural speaking place. I find that if I say, oh, okay, just say, how are you today? They'll already start to manufacture.
Right.
And they'll sound like Julia Child.
Right.
Which, I mean, that serves a purpose. Right. That serves a purpose. She's great. That kind of sound is good for getting other things. Mm-hmm. But no, I said, no. Like, just pretend you just saw me in the hallway. Just say it. Hey, how are you today? Then I find on the keyboard around that general area of where they are.
Huh?
Takes me a little while. I don't have perfect pitch, so I'm like dinking around on the piano trying to find. And then I say, okay, we're going to say, how are you today? And then we're going to do a 5-note descending scale singing, how are you today?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, you could say, oh, I'm always thinking about food. So sometimes I do exercises that have to do with, this is just the one that popped into my head that I know that I do. How are you today? Then we ascend. Then how are you today? 5-note scale. How are you today? And so on. I find as you ascend, there's going to want to be manufacturing because you're going to start speaking higher. How are you? How are you? No, stay the same. Keep it the same energy, same, just natural, natural, natural. Speech, 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 and then sing the notes. Speaking of psychological, I think with mezzos, if they see where they are on the keyboard, they'll freak out.
Yep.
But if you're just doing speech to sing, if you're just doing a regular old something you'd say in the hallway and then singing a little 5-note thing, they don't know where they are necessarily. And so we just keep doing that. And they usually surprise themselves that, oh, I didn't know it was that high. So as a teacher, you really have to listen for just the most minute shifts, because I've gotten pretty good at telling when someone sort of drops the sound in the speech, like if they start to drop it too low or they start to shift it too high, and then they're trying to sing in that sort of fakey, speechy kind of sound, and then they'll transfer that over to the singing.
Right.
So I love that one. I go, I'll start wherever their speech is. Right. And then usually I move up, but we might do another one and then I'll move down.
Yeah. I love you. I think I first heard that reading The Naked Voice. I use that too.
I did a workshop with him at Northwestern, and
Stephen Smith.
So amazing at just picking it out. And his big thing is, if you would say, "Are you okay?" and then you would say, "Mm-hmm," wherever your "mm-hmm" is, and he'd say, "No, that wasn't real."
Yeah.
Okay. Are you gonna use that next? Mm-hmm. And then wherever that is, he finds it on the keyboard, and it's just speech sing. Yeah, that helps also with my BFA students, my musical theater, because they're gonna belt.
Right, exactly.
And so much of that comes from speech, and so I do a lot of that with them, that we just stay in that zone, in the speech zone, and then of course they're approaching it slightly different on the way up than somebody else, but that's their own thing.
Yeah.
So I love to do a lot of that, a lot of speech singing. And then another one is putting a pencil in your mouth. I don't know if have you done that? Yeah. So I like to put a pencil in the mouth, and then I love an E vowel. I just love it.
Great for vowels, yeah.
I have one student who's like, ugh, I hate the E vowel. So adamant. He hates it so much. I'm like, okay. Oh, but you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
You can't avoid the E vowel at all times. But I let him start with other things besides E. But for mezzos, I find that we tend to drop the middle voice, again, because we think it needs to be darker, or it needs to be, really chest heavy. And so we like to drop instead of keeping up.
Yep.
So with the pencil in the mouth, I like to do, it could be a longer scale, but I like to do just 5-note scales.
We're getting
mouth on an E vowel.
We're getting more votes against E vowels here in the comments right now.
It's okay. It's not everybody's go-to. That's totally okay. I just find for me, and again, this is sort of the shifting between soprano and mezzo. There are days where I just say, oh my gosh, I feel like such a soprano today.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to sing something that is not really that soprano-y. Other days, I've got this high stuff to do, and I'm like, I can't move my voice at all.
Yeah.
I have nothing on top. It just is so heavy. So it really is, talk about neurotic.
Mm-hmm.
Any day. It's like, am I mezzo today or soprano today? I'm not sure where I am today. Multiple personalities. But for me, the E vowel is the one that's going to cut through the weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's just for my own voice. The E vowel cuts through the weight that I carry sometimes when I'm having a more mezzo-y day.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not what I need that day.
Right.
So an E vowel is going to get me just straight out, cut through any of the mud. So you don't have to do an E vowel with the pencil, but I do like to do E. Plus, I think it's easier to hold in your mouth if you're doing an E vowel. Or you can do a vowel with the pencil in your mouth. And the E vowel, I think, lends itself. I talk about cheekbones all day long. Mm-hmm. I just feel like that's all I talk about. So with a pencil in your mouth, to keep it in your mouth, you can't really have a flat face. I mean, you can, but it encourages this kind of lift, which is going to help not drop the middle voice. So much. It's just this.
Right.
Keeping everything lifted. I feel like if once that locks in for me, then my coloratura is better and my pitch is better.
Yes.
Like so many things are better.
Yes.
And pencil, I don't like to use the word force, but you don't have much of a choice, just the way that it's structured if you have the pencil in your mouth, that you just can't drop as naturally as you would if you didn't have the pencil. And like we've talked about, not to reiterate too much, but we think mezzos need to sound a certain way. And so by dropping, you're going to very quickly get that sound that you think you're supposed to have.
And then it's not going to resonate.
It's not going to resonate because you're just like down groveling and it doesn't cut through anything. It just is, it's just dropped. So yeah, as a teacher, it's just being able to listen for the slightest amount of going sort of off the track.
Yep.
And then say, ooh, 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 let's do it again.
Right.
Let's do it again. You dropped. And they'll be like, I did? Like just at the very end. Just at the very end, you sort of kind of fell off. Yeah. And then we'll do it again. And then I'll say, did you notice the difference? I am all about my students being able to articulate everything that they're doing.
Yes. Same.
I had a student for 3 years. This was at Lee. I would say, so-and-so, do you know how you did that? Do you know how you did that? And she would say, I don't know. I said, okay, we're going to do it again. For 3 years, her answer was almost always, I don't know. And I said, okay, I can tell you how you're doing it. That doesn't serve you in any way other than, oh, okay, she told me I did it right.
Right.
And then they leave and they don't have any idea how they did it. I'll never forget the day where I said, okay, that was better. How did you do it? And she said, I think I did whatever it was. 3 years it took for her to say something besides, I don't know. But what I loved about that is that she was honest. Yeah. She didn't try to make up something I wanted to hear. Yeah. She legitimately did not know physically how she was doing it. But I ask my students constantly, can you tell the difference? Don't lie to me. Can you tell the difference? They know better than lie to me. Yeah. I don't want to have a lie jar. Yeah. In my studio, as long as sorry jar. And sometimes they'll say, oh, and I'll say, okay, let's do it again. But this time I want you to have an answer. Whatever it is. Like, I'm not looking for a set thing, but because often we're doing things, we're not thinking about it. Yeah. So I say, okay, I need you to think about it this time. We're going to do it again. try to have an answer for me.
Yes.
Then once they just turn their focus onto, oh, my tongue was doing whatever. Right. Okay, bingo.
Right.
I need my students, when they walk out of my studio, I want to have some confidence that they can recreate that for themselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
We all know plenty of teachers who will just say, oh, okay, that was better. Great. That was right. That's it. They'll never say how, why. They'll never give the student the opportunity to express the how or why. They'll just say, oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Fun. So then the student thinks, oh, goody. Okay, great. Dr. Songer's happy because I did it right. No, I want to know that you know how you did it.
Absolutely.
We teach ourselves.
Right.
You spend more time outside of the studio than you do in the studio.
That's exactly what I always say. I love that. Yes.
So if they're just doing it and then they say, oh, ooh, she said that was right, but I don't remember what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to do the same thing that's not productive over and over again to try to recreate the process because the teacher didn't make you explain it.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if the answer is, I don't know.
Right.
That was what somebody told me before I took my comprehensive exams. I learned that. And one of my answers was, I don't know. And I didn't know. And they were already expecting me to know everything about the history of music ever, you know, and it was like they just landed on something that I didn't know. And rather than stumble and make myself look like a fool, I just said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And okay, we'll move on to something else.
Yeah.
So again, language is important. So if you say to a student, it's okay if you don't know, but I want you to try to articulate it.
Yes.
If you don't know, work through it.
Right.
But I want you to be able to tell me how you did that. You have to be curious about how this all works.
Mm-hmm.
So much happening all at the same time that if you're just guessing, crossing your fingers and hoping that it's going to sound good, good luck with that. It's so important to have those conversations. It takes more time. It takes more time in the lesson. Sorry, but it's worth it because then they start to figure it out.
That's right.
They start to figure it out.
That's right. Yeah.
Not that I'm always looking to do less, but then you do less as a teacher once they start to figure it out.
Right. Well, we should
constantly, you know, fixing blah, 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 blah. It's like, ooh, they're starting to get that. We don't have to spend much time on that.
Exactly.
Which is exciting. It means that they're growing. That's what it should be. But it's not being afraid to have the conversations. And there have been plenty of times, especially with my musical theater students, because I don't belt, there have been times where a student has asked me something and I say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out.
Exactly.
I'll find out. I just simply do not know. And I don't want to tell you something that will be destructive to your singing. And so I'm not ashamed to say I don't know. Okay, sure, I have a doctorate in voice, but that doesn't mean I know everything. And so I'll just say, ooh, I just don't know.
Yeah.
But then I always follow up and I try to figure it out. And then I come back and I say, hey, I looked into what question that you had and then we talk through it.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah. I love that. I talk that all of this is resonating so much with a similar way that I try to teach as well. And I always tell my students, first of all, like you said, you know, you're only spending 30 minutes or an hour with me once a week and you're with yourself all the time. So you have to be your own teacher for most of the time.
Right.
So we learn our lessons, how to be our own teacher, how to be a critical thinker, how to listen to yourself. And then because the goal is you want them to be an independent learner. If they're in a performance situation and things aren't going well, instead of having a freak out, they have the tools to think, wait, there's something happening, but I know how to fix this. I've been in this before. I know how to do, which for me was a huge confidence boost when I finally figured out, like when I started studying vocal anatomy and figured out how the voice worked and, you know, got really curious about that. And not that I know, you know, everything, but that's been a huge, that was a
Yeah.
huge point in my own singing. So we want to give the students the tools to do that on their own. That's, we want them to be independent singers, independent of.
Because I teach a lot of music ed students, and
Mm-hmm.
the reality of their life is once they're done with school, they're going to start teaching right away. They might not be taking lessons.
Exactly.
Most people are not. And so the more tools that I can give them as they leave,
Right.
and especially for the music ed people, I say, if your answer is I don't know all the time, how are you going to tell it to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
You have to know how to do it yourself.
Right.
If you're going to teach other people how to do it.
Right.
So yeah, you might say the wrong thing or, you know, say something crazy. Okay. It's crazy what we do.
Yeah.
So if you don't know exactly what your body did at any given time, well, then do it again.
Yeah.
And be more curious.
Mm-hmm.
About being curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you'll be done with school soon, and then once you're done with graduate school, yeah, you're teaching yourself a lot. I mean, you already have a great performing career, but once you're out of school, I actually felt the most free in my singing when I was out of school.
Sure.
Because I didn't have to do anything for a grade. And
right.
I only
yeah.
what I sing, not
totally.
what I sing, and that's fine. That serves a purpose. But when I got out of school and I started doing recitals, and I thought, I can do whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I did whatever I wanted. Which is, it's just fun. There's just freedom. There's so I'm gonna be glad for you when you're done. Just because it's a lot. It's a lot, but the freedom that you'll find is wonderful.
Absolutely. Well,
that's in your life and all the things. There's just so much more freedom.
Right. That's what I was worried about going back, to be honest with you, because I took 4 years off between my master's and my doctorate, and I taught and I just sang, and I was worried about going back and really losing, because I remembered how much, again, the perfectionism thing, how much you just kind of get in this rut and you have to sing this certain kind of way, this certain kind of music. So actually taking that time off and really kind of knowing how that felt to experience some of that freedom that you're talking about, and then going back has given me a very different perspective on how I sing now, even in school. And I am also looking forward to being done and discovering that again. But I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that's important for people to realize as they're in school, because if people that are listening that are in their undergraduate right now, or they've gone straight through their master's, or maybe you've gone straight through your doctorate and you haven't experienced that yet, I think it's really important to realize that you're in an academic bubble right now, which is fine, and that's part of your life, and you have to do that. But just know that as we're talking about this curiosity, there's a whole other world out there, and it is important to experiment. It is important to find who you really are, because you're going to get out and then you're going to realize that, okay, there's a million of the kind of singer that I am right now, because I am a cookie cutter singer. I've learned this specific repertoire, this specific genre, but I think the music world is so much more exciting than that. And even the classical, even if you stay in classical music, the classical music world is so much more exciting than that. And I mean, even with the social media stuff right now, you know, that I'm doing, like, it's been so much fun to kind of discover the classical music world within this context. Like, there's just so much creativity than we a lot of times think there is after we get out of school or context. Yeah, totally. Okay, let's wrap this up now. Again, thank you so much for talking to me. I feel like I
Oh my gosh, thank you for asking me.
I have really, really enjoyed this. And by the way, we got a lot of other votes for evals coming in. So this is great. A lot of people like the eval.
Take a poll.
Yeah. I know. So thank you, those of you that joined us. We got Stephanie earlier said that's so great, especially for people pleasers like me who feel they need all the answers. So I think that was when we were talking about having our students observe themselves and being curious. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of great comments from people. Thank you so much.
Teacher knows that you're a people pleaser, then that teacher needs to encourage you to I don't want to say get out of it, but just give you permission to, the teacher isn't looking for just the right answer. Usually I'm just looking for an answer.
Yeah.
And if it's way off base, then we can have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But normally it's just, I'm just trying to get somebody to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Say something, which could then lead, maybe we're talking about the tongue, and that could lead to something else, and then it could lead to something else. But if you have a student who's always worried about saying just the right thing, release them from that.
Yes.
Give them permission to release from that. Because if you give that, if they think that that's the expectation, well, then everybody's going to be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so much good wisdom today. We have I think a lot of your former students are on here. They're saying that too.
I didn't see names of students, so hopefully I didn't describe, or maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe you're thinking, oh, I was the one who cried all the time. That's okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure having you on here and talking to you. I always love talking to you and getting your perspective on things. Like you said yourself, it's so real. I feel like that's a strength of yours, and I really appreciate that about you.
Worse, you know.
Hey, I think
people don't want it. They don't want to hear it, and I try to be cognizant of that and read the room. Mm-hmm. I do. And being quiet sort of helps also, because I'm not just always spitting out everything that I think.
Yeah. But when you do, it's wisdom, right? It's
I'm old. Yes, that comes with getting old.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I will see you in the virtual world.
Yes. Yeah.
It's really great talking to you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your holiday break.
Oh, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Thank you all for joining us.